Hi, it's Jan from Sleeping Baby Productions. This is a companion video to how I would make a reversible sling. It's on the page that's linked to below, assuming that YouTube lets me do that. Anyway, this is a method that I typically use for a reversible sling if I don't want any visible top stitching when it's done at the rings, or if I'm using two fabrics that are really different weights. On the page, I'm using brocade, which isn't really silk, it's like a polyester rayon, but it's fairly heavy and it's slippery. It'll hold a lot of weight. And Dupioni silk, which some is strong enough by itself, but most of it is going to be fairly thin. So if you're making a sling with it, a double layer is nice. And the Dupioni brocade look is a really gorgeous sling, if a bit hard to adjust. Anyway, this would be for that sort of situation where you have one heavy fabric and then it's lined with a lighter fabric. That is not the case with these actual fabrics because I don't really want to deal with brocade for a video. It would take forever. So what I have is just a cotton broadcloth and a quilting cotton. This is a Michael Miller print. If you're curious, I think it's Baby Zoology. You can find that on fabric.com if you are so inclined. So for this method, we're going to start out with two pieces that are the same width, and then one of them is 3 inches longer than the other. In this case, you want the heavier fabric, the brocade, or in this example, the broadcloth to be 3 inches longer. So what I'm going to do is just make sure that they are 3 inches apart at the top and the bottom, and sort of assuming that it's going to stay 3 inches and not wobble back and forth. And then I've got my machine set up for a stitch that locks the start and finish by itself. Some machines do that, some don't. Remember to press reverse if yours does not. And it's not a long stitch. I've got it right now at about 3.5. The length goes between 0 and 5, so this is sort of a middle long stitch. You don't want your stitches too close together because in that case you're basically perforating your fabric and it's not any safer. At the same time, you don't want them too far apart because that'll make it more likely to come out. So I think this is a nice compromise. So I've stitched down the whole length, right sides together. And then I'm just going to open this out. Make sure that the heavier fabric ends up behind the lighter fabric, and you can either bring this to your iron and press it, or if you're using cotton you can just finger press. If I were not making a video I might go to the iron and press, but since I am, I will not. And then I'm just going to do a top stitch on this for a little extra security. I'm going to use the side of my presser foot as a guide. I've actually already done this part once before because I took a phone call right in the middle of recording a video. Okay, now if you are using slippery fabrics at this point, it's not a bad idea to baste right along here so that you're catching this the 3-inch overlap. Because this isn't slippery and because this is sort of a quick and dirty video, I'm not going to do that. What I am going to do is mark the center. I'm just going to fold this in half. And because this is essentially a kid's play sling, I'm going to do just a simple box pleat. If you're making a sling for yourself or for a friend, use whatever shoulder style you want with this method. It's very easy to do gathered, probably the simplest that way, although if you're using heavy fabrics, it's going to be really, really hard to scrunch up on your shoulder if you use a gathered shoulder. When I was making these to sell, I would just do my standard pleats, and that's shown on the web page, but basically just real quick and dirty here. I would pleat, and obviously that's not enough pleats, and then put the rings on. You'll see that step when I do the box pleat though. But you can use any shoulder style you like with this. So because I'm doing a box pleat, I've got my center marked. I'm just going to bring up the edge, and what I want is about 1/2 inch hanging over the edge there. My battery is running low, oh dear. And then pin. If you wanted to be a little more conscientious about this, you could measure and press and all that good stuff. but because this is a short video, I'm not going to do that. And then I'm going to baste these in. And for basting, I don't know if you've seen my other videos, but I tend to use a very long stitch. So on the 0 to 5, it's a 5. And then I also, let's show that if I can, reduce the tension in the needle. And that makes the stitches a lot easier to take out once you're ready to. And I'm going to go about 2 or 2.5 inches from the edge. This is just to hold those pleats in place. It's not going to be in the finished product at all. Okay. Remember to set your tension back to normal. And then I'm going to thread the rings on, making sure my pins are all out. Now this is how you end up with a sling that you don't need to do top stitching around the rings, because I'm just going to turn this into a pillowcase, sew up as close to the rings as I can, and then turn it right side out, and it'll be strong enough inside because you have this overlap. This one fabric is basically enough, assuming it's a heavier fabric, to hold the child's weight. And any exterior sewing is just going to be cosmetic. So I'm going to, here is another place to pin if you're using slippery fabrics. You could even, if you have a serger, you could use the serger along this edge to get it nice and neat. But we are going quick and dirty. So you can't get too close to the rings. That's as far as I can get, and I'm still, I don't know, an inch away from the rings there, but that's not a big deal. We'll catch some of that on the way back on the outside. So I'm going to sew up both sides here. And you know, if you're doing a gathered shoulder, this is even easier. You don't have to worry about maybe catching your pleats in the stitching. But if you are using pleats, watch for that. This is going to be really boring if I sew down the whole thing, so I'm just going to do part of this. What you will end up doing is sewing around the two. Basically, you're making a U shape along one long side, along the bottom, leave a hole for turning, and then back up the long side. I'm just going to do these short sides, or this is going to be a half-hour video. And all of this is also on the webpage, so you don't need to get too in-depth, I think. I'll probably finish this and give it to a small child once I turn the video off. Okay, so assuming that I've actually sewed around the whole thing, I'm turning this through a small hole that I will stitch up when I hit the top stitching phase. So you can see with my box pleat, you're going to want to bring this sewn edge out. And this one too, because we're going to get those in top stitching. This raw edge is going to end up kind of folded under in there anyway. If you're so inclined, and if you're making a nice sling with fabric that's going to ravel, it's a good idea to go in there with some hand stitching and just make sure that that stays in place. But, you know, quick and dirty. I'm going to try not to, well, you know what? I think I will catch the box pleats in them right up there. And then I'll just sort of gradually taper those out. That'll keep the box pleat in place. And then again, this top stitching you're going to do around the whole outside. I tend, when I'm top stitching like this, to stop every 6 inches or so, kind of pull the fabrics to get right up to the sewing line. If you are so inclined, you can go to the iron and do that, and it takes a little bit longer, but it does look neater. It's more finished looking. But since this isn't going to be finished, I'm not going to worry about that. And you would, especially if you're using nice fabrics, match your thread color to the fabric color. But once again, the other thing you can do with this is sew in whatever pleats you use. So I could have sewn a line where I had that fold initially, and that would definitely keep the pleats in place. That's not a bad idea if you're doing some kind of pleated shoulder. That way you don't need any exterior stitching there. I would do a little exterior stitching in this case, just because I haven't done that inside. So that's basically what you're looking at with this method. At this point, I can take out my basting stitches, and because I've got those top stitching lines on the outsides, this is basically going to stay the way we want it. Well, except there, because I didn't catch it. So on the inside, not a bad idea. Or if you don't, if you don't trust that, then you can do a line or two here. This is not weight bearing. This is just to hold the pleats where you want them. And you could do a decorative stitch here. When I was doing silk slings, I would typically do a decorative stitch along here, just for looks, because it's nice. And that will keep those folds in place. And voila! It's totally reversible. When you're wearing it, you don't see the opposite color at the ring end here. The only place where you see it is within the rings, and then once you have it threaded, you really don't see that at all. So that's a nice way to make it fully reversible. The next video is kind of a shortcut version of this, where you do fold it over and stitch, but it's going to show the same color, so it won't look so obviously pillowcased, basically. I hope that was helpful if you were having trouble with the written directions, and check back again for more videos. Thanks!